when the malefic nature of a planet combines with an unfavorable zodiacal state, this combination will cause evils for the entire Earth during its duration, and consequently even more certainly for individuals born at the moment when these planets undergo yet another unfortunate determination by their position in unlucky houses. So the planet malefic in a negative house, unsuitable for its sign, already will cause problems in the world. But if it falls into an individual's bad negative house when it is born, when she or he is born, then it's going to be really felt by that individual for the rest of one's life. Of course, there could be some things done to alleviate the problems, such as by becoming awakened when then you are not affected by the problems as badly as other people. Jupiter in favorable zodiacal state in the 8th will augur a peaceful death, and by reason of its opposition to the 2nd, riches. So Morin here also emphasizes that it's important to understand that when the planet is located in some house, then it's also important to see the opposition. So, and interestingly, Morin says that if good planet benefic opposes some house, it can manifest the benefits of that house. So for example, here we can see that Jupiter in the 8th opposing the 2nd house manifests riches, because 2nd house stands for wealth. However, if a malefic is in some house, then its opposition can bring out the negative events signified by the opposing house. On the contrary, a malefic in unfavorable zodiacal state has the greatest capacity to cause damage for an unfavorable accidental determination. Just as I said, in an unfortunate house, it will protect against misfortune. Okay, I will read this from the beginning. Furthermore, a benefic in a favorable zodiacal state in a fortunate house will realize abundantly and easily the good indicated there, such as Venus in the 11th. In an unfortunate house, it will protect against misfortune, or will lessen it, or will cause to arise from the bad the hope of good, as for example, recovery from sickness, liberation from prison, victory over enemies, a death without violence or suffering, since death itself is inevitable. On the other hand, a malefic in a favorable zodiacal state in an unfortunate house, Morin tends to repeat himself a lot, but I find it good because it helps to really memorize what he says. Benefics by nature or by zodiacal state. Here also Morin says that benefics can be by nature, such as Jupiter and Venus, or by zodiacal state. So planets in their domicile or exaltation are called benefics according to Morin. Yet if it's, for example, Saturn or Mars in their domicile or exaltation, they still can cause some evil. So benefics by nature or by the zodiacal state reveal their constructive action by producing advantage when they are in fortunate houses, and hindering or removing disadvantage when in unfortunate houses. On the other hand, malefics by nature or zodiacal state, so even if a planet is neutral, for example Mercury, but it's in a bad zodiacal state, such as Pisces, then they act as malefics according to Morin, but again you need to look at the aspects too. So on the other hand, malefics by nature or zodiacal state manifest their destructive action by causing damage in unfortunate houses and by obstructing or removing benefit in fortunate houses. So for example, even if Jupiter is located in a fortunate house, if it's in a bad zodiacal state, then it will kind of not be able to help you. However, if it has good aspects, some help will come, some good things will manifest. But if it is even more afflicted through aspects, then it will do more harm than good, even though by its nature Jupiter is a benefic. That is why, for example, if a planet in favorable zodiacal state is in 2nd and rules in 7th, the native will acquire wealth from his marriage, fights, or wars. If it rules in 10th, his fortune will come from his profession, his honors, or his personal enterprise. So, for example, if a planet is in the 2nd house and it's located in a good sign for it, and it also rules the 7th house, then marriage partner can cause riches. So according to Morin, it's very important to look at which signs particular planets rule. Even though they are in one house, they can still rule another sign in another house, and according to its position in a particular sign, you can judge the matters of the house whose sign it also rules, but where it isn't located. When there are several planets, 3, 4, or 5 in the same house, the house must be considered particularly important among the houses because it anticipates something extraordinary in connection with the affairs which it essentially signifies. The more planets there are in the house, the more the affairs which derive from it will be remarkably good or bad. And it also basically he explains that you have to pay attention mostly to the planet which is in its strength, which is exalted in its domicile, which feels good in that particular house, which has good aspects to benefics or luminaries. So judge the planets according to how well they are located, because those who are the strongest will of course influence the house the most. If in a good house a benefic is followed by a benefic, this is very fortunate because it signifies that the promised good will endure. If it's a malefic which follows the benefic in a good house, the good anticipated by the first will end badly or will be opposed. And the same applies to dispositor. For example, if one house has is in a bad state, but then its dispositor is in a good state, the dispositor of the sign, zodiacal sign in a particular house, then firstly matters will go badly, but then they will turn to your advantage. In a similar fashion, if the ruler of 6th is in 7th, it is possible to predict that the native will wed his or her servant, or that the servant will bring troubles or lawsuits to the native. So all according to the state of the planets there and the aspects. So here Morin provides many examples of what it means when the ruler of one house is in another and so forth. As ruler of the ascendant is in 6th, it means the abasement of the soul to a servant's position or tastes or studies and occupations which apply to things referring to service or animals. So here, if the ascendant, the planet ruling the ascendant is found in the 6th house, very often we find people who are doing some kind of, who are working under managers, because now we are not in those times where you are a servant, but it often means that the person is in some kind of occupation where they have managers, where they work under managers, or sometimes it can mean that the person can be a doctor, because the sixth house is the house of healthcare. It could be a person, could be a personal trainer, and those people will be successful if, especially successful, if there is a trine from the sixth house to an exalted or well-placed planet in the 10th house. If, for example, the ruler of 1 is in 10th, or the ruler of 10th is in 1, this augurs for the native in both cases enterprises and the pursuit of a career and honors. This is considered such a great placement, both of them. However, again, you have to look at the how the planets are placed, whether they're in their fall or exaltation, and the aspects that they make, because this will also largely determine whether the person will achieve success or they will just be ambitious for success. The ruler of the ruler of the 3rd house, for example, if it's in the 8th house, it ought to signify death to brothers of the native. Oh, here he says that he disagrees with this kind of understanding, because he says there is actually a way to find out if your brothers or sisters can die prematurely, but it's not by looking at where the ruler is placed. I mean, it could happen, and I think Morin says, I don't know if he says it here, but yeah, it could happen. And I also have a friend who had Pluto, afflicted Pluto in the 3rd, and her brother died early. So it could also mean if there is some kind of malefic in the 3rd house that is afflicted, it could signify the death of a brother or sister, but also it can be that if the ruler of the 3rd house is in the 10th house, that's more likely to be the death of a brother or sister, because from the 3rd house, if you count from taking 3rd house as the 1st house of your brother or sister and counting to 8, you will end up in the 10th house of your birth chart. And if the ruler of the 3rd house is placed there, it could be that your brother or sister could die prematurely. Thus, the ruler of 12 in 8 foretells death by sickness or prison or exile. The ruler of 7 in 8, death from the spouse or a quarrel. The ruler of 1 in 8, that the native himself will cause his death. So this is, I find it very interesting, and I do believe this to be true, because that's the way that I also analyze my charts, to look at where the rulers of one house is in which house it's placed, and then make interpretations of that. However, different houses have different interpretations. So for example, 12th house can not only mean sickness, it can mean imprisonment, for example, or being held in a hospital. So it's very important not to only make one prediction, but to have several explanations available in case one doesn't apply and another applies. It is generally believed that a planet by its domicile signifies the permanence or stability of things it promises. Interestingly, this is something that I haven't seen in other astrology books. So here he says that if a planet is found in your chart ruling the sign that it's placed in, wherever it's placed, in whichever house, in that house, the matters will be kind of not changing. Yet if a planet is in its exaltation, it indicates sudden changes which are quite remarkable. So interestingly, here it says that if a planet is in its domicile, things will be the way that they are for the rest of your life in that particular area of life signified by the house. Yet if a planet is in its exaltation, you will, for example, be able to get sudden benefits, but they won't be continuous, but suddenly you may get some kind of advantage signified by that house. Okay, now this video is getting long. I think that I've read out around half of the passages that I highlighted, but I highly recommend you this book if you are intermediate astrologer, if you want to take your astrology a little bit, to find out more deeply about astrology. This is a very good book. Of course, it's a little archaic, so the way that it's written, it's not in a modern English language, but if I'm not from any English speaking country and I'm able to understand it, I'm sure that you would too. So again, the book, the name of the book is Astrosynthesis by Morin de Villefranche. Probably I pronounced the surname wrong, but I don't know French. So I hope you enjoyed some excerpts from this book. Have a lovely day. Take care.